2026 is not going to change your life. Your habits will, the calendar will flip, the year will move forward, and most people will stay exactly the same. Not because they lack potential, but because they never change what they do daily. If you walk into 2026 with the same habits, you'll carry the same problems, the same income, the same frustration, just with a new date on the wall. But if you change the way you think, decide, and act, 2026 can become the year everything finally shifts. Most people don't fail because they lack talent. They fail because they keep repeating habits that quietly sabotage their future. And the truth is, 2026 will not magically be better just because the calendar changes. Your life changes when you change. So today, I want to talk to you about 5 habits that, if you commit to them, will fundamentally alter the direction of your life in 2026 and beyond. The first habit is taking radical responsibility, not partial responsibility, not conditional responsibility, radical responsibility. The moment you stop blaming the economy, your parents, your past, your boss, or your circumstances, is the moment your power comes back to you. Because if it's their fault, you're powerless. But if it's your responsibility, you can change it. Successful people don't ask, why did this happen to me? They ask, what can I do about it? Responsibility is heavy, but it's also the weight that builds strength. The second habit is upgrading your identity before chasing your goals. Most people try to do more without becoming more. They say, I want more nay, more success, more confidence, but they never ask, who must I become to deserve that level of life? Your habits are not random. They are aligned with who you believe you are. When you change your self-image, your behavior follows automatically. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your identity. Change who you see in the mirror, and the mirror will start showing you a different life. The third habit is controlling your inputs. What you allow into your mind on a daily basis will eventually show up in your results. If you feed your mind negativity, gossip, fear, and distractions, don't be surprised when confusion and inconsistency show up in your life. But when you deliberately choose what you listen to, what you read, who you learn from, and what conversations you entertain, your thinking upgrades. And when your thinking upgrades, your decisions upgrade. Guard your mind like your future depends on it, because it does. The fourth habit is learning to delay gratification. Most people want the reward before the work. They want comfort now and success later, but life doesn't work that way. The people who win are willing to say no today so they can say a yes tomorrow. They trade short-term pleasure for long-term freedom. Discipline is not punishment, it's a strategy. Every time you choose what's hard now or what's easy now, you're voting for the life you actually want. The fifth habit is building one valuable, monetizable skill and committing to it. Not 10 skills, not chasing every opportunity. One skill that solves problems for other people, because income follows value, not effort. The marketplace doesn't reward intentions, it rewards results. When you become highly skilled, you become hard to ignore. And when you combine skill with consistency, you create leverage. One skill, practiced daily, can change your financial future permanently. And underlying all of this is consistency, not motivation, consistency. Motivation is emotion. Consistency is intentional. Small actions done daily will always beat big actions done occasionally. You don't need a perfect year. You need a committed year. You don't need to do everything. You need to do the right things every day. So as you step into 2026, don't ask for an easier life. Ask for better habits. Because when your habits change, your choices change. When your choices change, why? Our results change. And when your results change, your life changes. The future you want is not waiting on luck, timing, or permission. It's waiting on your decision. Most people want a better life, but very few people want full responsibility for their life. And that's the paradox. Because the moment you take radical responsibility, your excuses lose their power and your potential finally wakes you. Radical responsibility means you stop negotiating with reality. You stop explaining why things are the way they are, and you start deciding what they will become. It's the understanding that your results are not random, they are responses to your choices, your habits, your standards, and your thinking. Taking radical responsibility doesn't mean everything that happened to you was fair. It means you refuse to let what happened to you control what happens next. It's realizing that blaming your past might feel justified, but it's also expensive. Blame always comes with a cost, and the cost is control. Because as long as someone else is responsible for your situation, you're waiting on someone else to fix it, and waiting is the slowest strategy for success. Radical responsibility is the M. Omit, you stop saying I can't because, and start asking how can I? It's when you stop pointing outward and start looking inward. Not to criticize yourself, but to empower yourself, because the same place your problems came from is the same place your solutions will come from. You don't change your life by changing people. You change your life by changing decisions. Most people outsource respo and stability without realizing it. They blame the economy for their income, their parents for their mindset, their boss for their lack of growth, their circumstances for their lack of discipline. But the truth is, responsibility is not about fault, it's about ownership. You don't have to be at fault to take responsibility, but you do have to take responsibility if you want control. Ownership is power. Victimhood is permission to stay stuck. When you take radical responsibility, you stop waiting to feel ready. You understand that clarity comes from action, not thought. You accept that motivation is unreliable, but discipline is always available. You realize that no one is coming to save you. And instead of feeling discouraged by that truth, you feel liberated by it. Because if no one is coming, that means the pen is already in your hand. Radical responsibility also forces you to raise your standards. You stop tolerating things you complain about. You stop repeating patterns you claim to hate. You stop saying you want more while doing what's comfortable. You understand that every time you accept less than your potential, you are training your life to give you less. Standards are invisible. Decisions you live by, and when you raise them, your behavior has no choice but to follow. This level of responsibility changes how you speak. You stop saying, I'll try, and start saying, I will. You stop saying someday and start putting dates on decisions. You stop saying that's just how I am and start asking, who do I need to become? Because identity drives behavior, and behavior drives results. When you take responsibility for who you are becoming, you automatically take responsibility for where you're going. And here's the part most people miss. Radical responsibility is not heavy, it's freeing. It removes confusion, it removes excuses, it removes the emotional chaos of feeling stuck but not knowing why. It gives you something solid to stand on. Because when you know the outcome, me is on you. You stop wasting energy on things you can't control and start mastering the things you can. Taking radical responsibility doesn't make life easy. It makes life clear. And clarity creates momentum. Momentum creates confidence. Confidence creates consistency. And consistency over time creates the life most people only talk about. The moment you fully accept that your life is your responsibility is the moment your life finally becomes your creation. Most people set goals that their current identity is not qualified to sustain. They want a new level of income, confidence, discipline, or success, but they are still thinking, acting, and deciding like the person they used to be. That's why progress feels temporary. They reach a goal, then fall back, not because the goal was wrong, but because their identity never changed. Your life is always moving in the direction of the strongest identity you hold, not the goals you write down. Upgrading your identity means you stop asking, what do I want? And start asking, who do I need to become? Because goals are external, but identity is internal. Goals can be achieved temporarily. Identity determines what you maintain per main. If you don't see yourself as disciplined, you'll eventually quit. If you don't see yourself as valuable, you'll undercharge. If you don't see yourself as consistent, you'll always start strong and finish weak. Identity is the thermostat. Goals are just the temperature you hope for. Most people try to change their behavior without changing their self-image, and that creates internal conflict. You can't consistently act in a way that contradicts how you see yourself. Eventually, your actions will collapse back to your identity. That's why affirmations without alignment don't work. Saying I am successful while living like someone who avoids responsibility only creates frustration. Identity upgrade is not pretending, it's practicing. You become someone new by repeatedly doing what that T person would do until it feels normal. Upgrading your identity requires honesty. You have to tell the truth about who you've been without attaching shame to it. Shame keeps identity locked. Responsibility unlocks it. You don't judge the old version of you, you outgrow it. You recognize that the habits you have today were once coping mechanisms, comfort choices, or survival strategies, but survive. Al thinking will never produce expansion results. Growth requires a new internal standard. When your identity upgrades, your standards automatically rise. You stop negotiating with distractions. You stop justifying inconsistency. You stop tolerating environments, conversations, and behaviors that don't match where you're going. Not because you're trying to be better than others, but because you're trying to be aligned with yourself. Alignment creates peace. Misalignment creates stress. Most people call it anxiety when it's really identity conflict. An upgraded identity also changes how you experience failure. You stop seeing setbacks as proof that you're incapable and start seeing them as feedback. You don't collapse emotionally every time something goes wrong because your confidence is no longer tied to outcomes. It's tied to who you are becoming. When identity is solid, results don't define you, they refine you. You don't quit when things get hard because quitting no longer matches who you believe you are. This is why sustainable success looks effortless from the outside. It's not because the work disappeared, it's because the internal resistance did. When who you are and what you're doing finally match. Discipline feels natural. Consistency feels logical. Growth feels expected. You're no longer forcing yourself to act differently. You're simply expressing who you've decided to be. Upgrading your identity before your goals is the difference between chasing success and attracting it. When you become the person who deserves the outcome stops feeling distant. The moment you decide to evolve internally, your external world has no choice but to follow. Your life is a reflection of what you allow into your mind on a daily basis, not what you intend, not what you hope for, what you consistently consume. Every thought you think today is connected to something you allowed in yesterday. And most people are not struggling because they lack opportunity. They're struggling because their mental environment is contaminated. You can't expect clarity from a cluttered mind or focus from constant noise. Control your inputs means you stop treating your mind like public property. You recognize that every conversation, every video, every song, every opinion you entertain is shaping the way you see yourself in the world. The mind does not filter information based on truth or usefulness, it filters based on repetition. Whatever you expose yourself to repeatedly becomes familiar, and whatever becomes familiar eventually feels normal. That's how limitations sneak into your life unnoticed. Most people consume information passively. They scroll without intention, listen without discernment, and surround themselves with voices that are louder than they are wise. Then they wonder why they feel anxious, unfocused, and unmotivated. Mental exhaustion is often not from doing too much, it's from consuming too much of what doesn't serve you. When your inputs are chaotic, your decisions will be inconsistent. Controlling your inputs is not about isolation, it's about selection. You don't need to block out the world. You need to choose what gets amplified. You beg to ask different questions before you allow something into your mind. Is this helping me grow? Is this strengthening my thinking? Is this aligning me with the future I say I want? If the answer is no, you stop justifying it as entertainment or just a habit. Everything you consume is either feeding your future or feeding your distractions. When you control your inputs, your self-talk begins change. The voice in your head is often an echo of the loudest voices around you. If you constantly hear doubt, criticism, and limitation, you will eventually repeat it to yourself. But when you intentionally feed your mind with constructive ideas, disciplined thinking, and expansive perspectives, your internal dialogue upgrades. And when your inner dialogue improves, your confidence improves. C, confidence is not a personality trait. It's a mental environment. This also applies to people. Not everyone deserves access to your vision. Some people are comfortable with their limitations and will unintentionally pressure you to keep yours. Their words may sound harmless, but repeated exposure to small-minded thinking shrinks ambition. Controlling your inputs means you stop seeking validation for own people who don't understand your direction. You don't argue with them, you just adjust access. As your inputs improve, your tolerance for nonsense decreases. You become less reactive, less distracted, and more deliberate. You start responding instead of reacting. You gain the ability to sit with discomfort without needing constant stimulation. That's where focus is built. Focus is not found, it's protected, and protection requires boundaries. Over time, controlled inputs compound into clear thinking. Clear thinking leads to better decisions. Better decisions lead to better results, and better results reinforce the belief that you are capable of more. This is why controlling your inputs is not a small habit. It's a foundational one. When you decide what enters your mind, you decide the direction your life is allowed to go. Most people don't fail because they lack opportunity. They fail because they choose comfort over progress. The ability to delay gratification is one of the clearest dividing lines between people who build extraordinary lives and people who stay stuck, wishing things were different. Every meaningful result in life lives on the other side of patience, discipline, and the willingness to sacrifice something now for something greater later. Delaying gratification means you stop asking, what feels good right now, and start asking, what serves my future? It's understanding that the human brain is wired to chase pleasure and avoid discomfort, but success requires you to override that wiring. The impulse to quit early, to spend instead of save, to relax instead of prepare, to scroll instead of study, that impulse never disappears. The difference is that disciplined people don't obey every impulse they feel. Most people don't realize how often they raid long-term freedom for short-term relief. They avoid difficult conversations, postpone hard decisions, and distract themselves when discomfort shows up. But discomfort is not a warning sign, it's a growth signal. When you delay gratification, you learn to sit with that discomfort without escaping it. And every time you do, you strengthen your self-respect. Self-respect grows when your actions align with your intentions. Delaying gratification is not about deprivation, it's about priority. It's choosing to build now so you can enjoy later. It's understanding that ease today creates pressure tomorrow, but pressure today creates ease tomorrow. The pain you avoid doesn't disappear, it just gets rescheduled, often with interest. Discipline is simply deciding which pain you're willing to pay. This habit changes how you see time. You stop needing instant results to stay committed. You trust the process because you trust yourself. You understand that consistency compounds quietly, and the rewards often arrive later than expected, but far greater than imagined. People who lack patience quit too early, right before the breakthrough they were praying for. When you delay gratification, you also gain emotional control. You stop being driven by moods and feelings. You don't need motivation to show up because you've trained yourself to act based on commitment, not emotion. That's power. Emotional discipline is freedom disguised as restraint. Over time, this habit rewires your identity. You start to see yourself as someone who finishes what they start, who does what needs to be done, even when it's uncomfortable. That belief changes how you approach every area of life: health, money, relationships, and growth. You don't chase quick wins anymore, you build lasting ones. The people who seem lucky are often just patient. They were willing to wait, work, and stay consistent, while others quit. Delaying gratification doesn't make life smaller, it makes it bigger. It allows you to design your future instead of reacting to the present. And once you master this habit, you stop being controlled by the moment and start being guided by the vision you're committed to becoming real. Most people don't struggle financially because they are lazy. They struggle because they never become truly valuable in one specific area. Effort without direction feels exhausting, and ambition without skill stays expensive. Building one monetizable skill is about focusing your energy where it actually produces leverage. Because in the real world, income is not based on how hard you try. It's based on how well you solve problems that other people are willing to pay for. A monetizable skill is not about talent or passion alone. It's about usefulness. It's the ability to produce a result that reduces pain, saves time, increases revenue, or creates clarity for someone else. The marketplace doesn't reward potential. It rewards performance. When you develop a skill that consistently produces outcomes, you stop chasing money and start attracting it. Money becomes a byproduct of value, not a source of stress. Most people make the mistake of trying to learn everything at once. They jump from skill to skill, opportunity to opportunity, hoping something finally works. But scattered effort creates shallow ability. Mastery requires focus. When you commit to one skill, you allow yourself to go deep instead of wide. Depth creates confidence. Confidence creates demand. Demand creates income. Building one skill also forces you to embrace repetition. You do the same thing again and again, not because it's exciting, but because it's effective. Repetition sharpens judgment. It builds speed. It builds intuition. Over time, what once felt difficult becomes natural. And when a skill becomes natural, you can perform under pressure, solve harder problems, and charge more for your work. This habit changes how you see learning. You stop consuming information for entertainment and start learning for application. You don't just watch, you practice. You don't just understand, you implement. You start measuring progress not by how much you know, but by what you can produce. That shift separates amateurs from professionals. As your skill improves, so does your self-image. You no longer rely on motivation or external validation because your confidence is rooted in competence. You know what you can do. That certainty makes you harder to replace and easier to trust. Opportunities begin to find you because people value reliability more than raw potential. Building a monetizable skill also teaches patience. Skill takes time. There are no shortcuts, only seasons of obscurity where you're improving without applause. Most people quit here because the results aren't immediate. But those who stay consistent during this phase eventually cross a threshold where effort produces exponential returns. What once required intense focus becomes efficient. That's leverage. One strong skill can change your entire life trajectory. It can give you options, independence, and confidence. It can fund your growth, expand your influence, and open doors that motivation alone never could. When you commit to becoming excellent at one thing that the world values, you stop hoping for opportunities and start becoming one. Most people don't fail because they choose the wrong goals. They fail because they are inconsistent, the right ones. They start strong, feel inspired, make promises to themselves, and then disappear the moment it gets inconvenient. Consistency is not about intensity. It's about reliability. And the people who change their lives are not the ones who do the most in a day, but the ones who refuse to stop showing up. Making consistency non-negotiable means you stop deciding every day whether you feel like doing the work. You decide once in advance and you let that decision run your life. When something is non-negotiable, emotions are no longer in charge. Mood doesn't matter. Circumstances don't matter. You show up because that's who you are, not because today feels easy. Most people wait for motivation to arrive before they act. But motivation is a reaction to progress, not a requirement for it. Action creates momentum, and momentum creates motivation. When you make consistency non-negotiable, you understand that discipline comes before, confidence not after. You don't need to feel ready. You need to be reliable. Consistency also removes overwhelm. You stop trying to do everything and focus on doing something every day. Small actions done repeatedly compound into massive results. What looks insignificant in the moment becomes unstoppable over time. But compounding only works when the action is repeated without interruption. Miss once, and it's easy to miss again. That's why consistency must be protected and negotiated. This habit rewires how you see yourself. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, your self-trust increases. Every time you break one, it erodes. Most people struggle with confidence, not because they aren't capable, but because they've taught themselves they're unreliable. Consistency repairs that relationship. It turns self-doubt into self-respect. When consistency becomes non-negotiable, excuses lose their power. You stop explaining why today is different. You stop making exceptions that quietly become habits. You don't look for perfect conditions. You work with the conditions you have. Progress doesn't require perfection. It requires presence. Consistency also simplifies decision-making. You waste less energy debating and more energy execute. You remove friction between intention and action. Life becomes less chaotic because your actions are predictable even when your emotions aren't. Predictable actions create predictable results. Over time, consistency builds an unfair advantage. While others start and stop, you keep going. While others chase shortcuts, you build foundations. While others wait for clarity, you create it through. It's repetition. This is why consistency beats talent, motivation, and luck, because those things are useless without follow-through. When you make consistency non-negotiable, success stops feeling dramatic and starts feeling inevitable. You don't rely on bursts of effort or moments of inspiration. You rely on systems, habits, and commitment. And eventually, the life you once struggled to imagine becomes the life you wake up living, simply because you refuse to quit. As you step into 2026, remember this: your future is not built in moments of inspiration, it is built in moments of decision. Not the loud decisions, but the quiet ones. The ones you make when no one is watching, when it's uncomfortable, when it would be easier to quit or postpone or settle. Those moments are shaping your life for you at now. You don't need a new year to give you permission to change. You need a new standard. A standard for responsibility, for identity, for what you allow into your mind, for how long you're willing to wait for what you truly want, for the skill you choose to master, and for how consistently you show up. When these become non-negotiable, success stops being something you chase and starts being something you create. 2026 will not reward intentions. It will reward habits. And the habits you commit to today will decide what you're proud of tomorrow. So don't leave this moment inspired. Leave it committed. Decide who you are becoming, act like that person daily, and refuse to go back, because the life you want isn't ahead of you in time, it's ahead of you in discipline.